Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm here with Matty B right now. I'm not sure if the other guys are going to jump in or not, but we're doing a special show. We are going to go down through the bowl games for college bowl season. Going to start. We're just going to jump right into it. If you're watching live, our layout's a little bit different today because I threw the games up in the top right, and if the other guys jump in, they'll just share a screen with Matt just to make things simpler so that people can kind of jump in and out if they're trying to track them. Now, some of the games have already started. We made our picks, and we're going to kind of go through. We're not going to talk like we normally do. We'll still have the Tuesday show. So if you go ahead and listen there, we're going to give our thoughts on the Steelers. Unfortunately, they couldn't pull it out this week. Kind of heated about that, but I'll save that. And we're going to jump right into bowl games. So the first one on Saturday, Grambling State, North Carolina A&T. I had that one picked correctly. If you go on, we're on ESPN. We have a Southbound Sports Pick'em. We threw it up there, so you can check us out. If you didn't join, keep an eye out for next year's. Matt, any surprises with this game?
Not really. To be honest, I really didn't know. I mean, with them being historic black colleges, I went with North Carolina just because I previously lived there and glad they got the win. But that was pretty much all I really knew of that matchup. Yeah,
they had an undefeated season right here close to Raleigh. I'm not sure. Is it 40 minutes away from where I am? An hour? So they're close in town, so I did watch them play a little bit, and I just thought they had the better team, and that's how it worked out. They ended an undefeated season 12-0, I believe. Next game, the North Texas versus Troy. I also got this one right. I had Troy. I wish I would have put a little bit more confidence into this one. The confidence thing is what kills me when I'm doing these bowl pick'ems because I kind of just don't care enough to pick it. But again, Troy was much better team in this matchup. They ended 11-2 compared to 9-5 for North Texas. Matt, your thoughts on this game?
Actually, this was another one that I ended up picking it wrongly just because I think during this time of year, one of the things that you got to look at is the amount of downtime that you have. And I think like at some point with some programs, you end up getting a bunch of upsets. So if you pick lucky, then you catch the benefit of that. Unfortunately, I did not and ended up watching them get dumped on by Troy. I thought maybe they were overhyped since they knocked off LSU earlier in the year, but they came to play, lit up 50 points on them.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump. My thought that you gave there was similar for this Western Kentucky game versus Georgia State. If people don't know, Georgia State's a relatively new program, so I did get this one wrong. They have only jumped up the bowl subdivision like a couple years ago. So I just thought by relative strength, they both had similar records, that Western Kentucky, they've played in big games over the past couple years, that they had that quality depth to pull this one out, but they did not. So big props to Georgia State for putting a quality program in place in just a few years. Any thoughts on this one, Matt?
Yeah, same boat. I went with Western Kentucky there. I believe that their coach left and had resigned.
Yeah.
In the past, they were a triple option team like the service academies. I think I was curious to see what was going to happen with that. I thought maybe that Western Kentucky having a little more stability, be able to pull that out. Obviously, they didn't.
Yeah, and then that was my thought for this next game on the list. And I don't know if these are... I think mine are in order. Boise State and Oregon. I meant to throw this up there for high confidence for that same reason. We all know Oregon lost their coach, Willie Taggart, to the Noles. So I just had a feeling that there was some inner turmoil I've heard about the way they promoted Cristobal. And whenever you're in bowl season, if you lose a coach, it's hard to get those guys pumped up. Oregon loses by 10. Not surprised. I wish I had more confidence in this one. I thought I moved it up, but I never know what's going on with this. Matt, you anything to add?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that Oregon came out as flat as what they are. People on some of the Florida State message boards were talking about Leavitt pulling a Mark Richt when he knew he was leaving for Georgia. Florida State was playing for a national championship, kind of played flat, uninspired, knowing that he had an out, and they ended up costing them a national championship because of it. obviously Oregon wasn't playing for the national championship there, but just those thoughts of possibly leaving and moving back to Tallahassee, was he really focused on, doing his best for the Oregon program? Didn't look like it. Looked like his defense was not playing very inspired. Didn't look like he was focused and in it. And, giving up 38 points to a mediocre Boise team definitely showed.
Yeah, that's always something to take in consideration is the coaching moves. These next couple games, smaller schools, I missed these, and then we're going to get into the ones that haven't happened yet. But Marshall versus Colorado State, I went with Marshall, and for the only reason in these bowl pick'ems you have to pick some upsets. 82% of the people were going for Colorado State. Records were the same. Growing up in Pennsylvania, that Marshall's really close. I knew they were going out west they went to New Mexico, and teams just from the east, they don't win out west, but I thought I'll just give it a go just for being a closer to home team as my upset pick, because I didn't really have any of these other ones off the bat. Anything for you, Matt, on this game?
Yeah, their head coach is one that he's popped up in a couple different circles for head coaching jobs. I think he seems to have some stability there at Marshall now, so he can kind of be a little bit more selective with when he decides to make the jump into a bigger program. But Doc Holliday is going to be a name that he's going to end up jumping into a bigger program here in the near future, I think.
All right, the next one, similar boat. Arkansas State versus Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders. Middle Tennessee, I should have went with the upset in this one. It was either or for me. I went with Marshall. I wasn't really sure on Middle Tennessee if they were the real deal or not. Everyone was going for Arkansas State. I went ahead and went with Arkansas State. I went with everyone else. I went with the money line. And Middle Tennessee pulled off the upset. So good for them. I misfired on my upset pick. But the first they did have an upset. Unfortunately, I just didn't get that one. Matt, any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it was a little bit disappointing in that one. I had one of my former quarterbacks playing defense for Arkansas State. Was hoping that they were going to get that bowl win. Unfortunately, Middle Tennessee pulled it off. So that lost big on that one because I ranked them as my second most confident pick and definitely did not pay out.
All right, speaking of confident picks, that's what I'm throwing up here for this next one. Akron versus Florida Atlantic, FAU. I think that's where Lane Kiffin coaches. Everyone's going with me. 94% of the people are going in that game. It's a 10-3 team versus 7-6. So I went up second highest points, 40 points. I'm going all out. I just think they're going to have it. They're going to have it in the bag. Lane Kiffin's coaching basically for his chance at another head coaching position down the line. That's what he wants to do, and he's not getting called for positions because of the way he acts on Twitter, which I think, today with the social media stuff, it's hard to kind of walk that line, but I think he definitely is going to get another shot, and this is his way to prove it. A big beatdown in one of these bowl games. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I do think Kiffin's going to win, but I think he's not going anywhere. With his family being in that Boca Raton area where Florida Atlantic is, I think he's content where he is. If there was ever a time that, for up and leaving Tennessee, he had the opportunity to go there and passed. He had the option of a couple other programs that if he wanted to leave, he definitely could have went back to the SEC and definitely made a splash, and he chose to stay. So I don't know if the dollar amount wasn't right for him to leave, but at this point, I think you got to look at the things that he's saying and the things that he's doing definitely make sense for him to stay put where he's at. If he's reached a point in his career and his life where he's deciding to have some stability and not chase the money like he did with some of his other positions. So I think it's going to be FAU. I think too much speed. Using Kendall Browse as his OC, I think Browse would be playing for a career change more than Kiffin.
That's one of the games I have to keep your eyes on this week. This next game I think is going to be a snoozer. SMU versus Louisiana Tech. I just went with SMU. They had the money line. 83% of the people are picking them to win. I don't have too much insight. They've been hurt ever since they were in the 80s when they got pinched for that with the death penalty. And they had to drop to kind of that lower division type deal. When the Big 12 formed, they weren't invited. Neither of these teams have any luster for me, so I just really don't care. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I went with Louisiana Tech, but that's primarily because their coach, Chad Morris, jumped for Arkansas State. I've been a big Chad Morris fan since he was at Clemson, running that wing T base with Gus Malzahn. So I like the things that he's doing offensively, and I think he's brought SMU
All right, Matt froze a little bit there. Go ahead, Matt. You froze a little bit.
Okay. With Chad Morris, their coach, he was a wing T guy with Gus Malzahn, and he was the head. He went from Clemson to SMU, so I kind of like the things that he was doing. I've been following him, and they're bringing SMU back. It's not all the way back like they were, when they had the Pony Express, but I think that he brought their program back to being a reputable program. Don't think that they're going to win because he's peacing out and going to Arkansas, so I went with La Tech.
Good thing. So one of the strategies that we mentioned earlier. Coach is leaving. Keep an eye on that. But it really matches up with who has the better athletes. This next one, Temple, Florida International. I kind of wanted to lean towards the Temple Owls, but they're mediocre. So I couldn't just pick them just because they're a Pennsylvania team. Had to go with Florida International. And this is where it's interesting the way Florida recruiting has kind of been the last couple of years with a bunch of coaching changes. Programs like FAU and FIU, I think that's what they are. Their initials, confusing as hell. But they have a chance to get some of those 3 or 4 star guys that the bigger programs there in turmoil that might get overlooked. Matt, you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it's another coin flip. I like Temple just because I think the things that they've been doing over the last couple of years have been pretty steady. It doesn't look like they dropped off at all when their head coach went left for Baylor. So I think the consistency there is going to win out with Temple.
Yeah, and the money line pick is on Florida International, I believe, and the popular pick, 55% of people are picking them. This next game, UAB in Ohio, isn't as close with the people picks. Right now, UAB, they're both 8-4 teams, UAB versus Ohio. UAB is getting 32% of the votes. Ohio's getting 68%. I'm also going with Ohio. These northern teams usually show up a little bit in the bowl games, kind of, I don't know if it's a chip on the shoulder, if it's because they're playing in the South. I expect this to be a hard-fought game, but ultimately I think Ohio comes out on top. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I picked UAB just simply because they got their program back. They've been terrible for a long time, and it's nice to see that the people advocated at the university to bring football back, and the university listened to the demands of the people and brought their football program back. And then not only is it back, but now they're playing in a bowl game. So I thought that was just a fun tidbit.
Yeah, that's a good point. If people aren't aware, the UAB program, I think it was officially canceled, right, Matt? Like they said that it was canceled and that was it. And then I think there were some petitions by players and other people around the program, boosters and whoever, and they were able to bring it back. So that is a cool storyline to keep an eye on. All right, our next one. Central Michigan versus Wyoming. Same reason. This one's a toss-up. 50-50 right now between people. I went with Central Michigan. I want to say, were they the team that was in a BCS bowl game a few years ago? That might have been Western Michigan. Either way, the Michigan teams are always tough for that same reason. They're able to get, kind of like the Florida schools, they're able to get guys around the Detroit, Cleveland area that are overlooked by the bigger colleges because they're looking south. So they always have decent athletes. Is this where Antonio Brown's from? I think he played there. And
yes.
J.J. Watt as well. That's a fact there. Look that up. I'm pretty sure J.J. Watt started his career there and might have transferred to Wisconsin. One of the Watts did. I'm 99% sure. I guess I should check that out. Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
I'm not 100% sure if he's playing in the bowl game, but Wyoming's quarterback is one of the hot people in this year's upcoming NFL draft. So if he plays, he may be playing to up his draft stock and draft status, playing on a bowl game in front of a national audience. So I went with Wyoming in that one, thinking that if he plays, they're going to bring that Cowboy program up.
All right, yeah, they did have a lot of good quarterback talk, and I did look that up quickly. J.J. Watt and Antonio Brown both played for Central Michigan and combined for 1,000 receiving yards in that first year. I think J.J. Watt, he played tight end. So that's a nice little fact there for people that might not know. In the next game, South Florida versus Texas Tech. This one always makes me laugh because I pick South Florida. Everyone's picking South Florida. But my, oh my, has the Texas Tech program fallen off a cliff since they ran Mike Leach out of town for no reason. So I laugh every time they lose a game because their higher-ups, basically they came into the job lynch mob and they folded. They didn't do research, didn't do anything. They folded to a job lynch mob that seems to be so prevalent today. And I hope South Florida wins. That's why I picked them. And I'm going to laugh because it couldn't happen to a better program like Texas Tech. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of went with USF. Charlie Strong out of Texas and just bounced right into a beautifully handcrafted program by good old Willie Taggart, who left that program in great shape before he bolted for Oregon. I think they're going to win. I would like to see Texas Tech play better just because I like Cliff Kingsbury, who was I believe a Mike Leach quarterback.
Yeah, he
putting
was.
in that air raid system. I think it's nice that he's home, but I don't think that they have enough talent to compete with what USF has right now.
All right, next one. We're starting to get up into the meat, almost to the Power 5 programs, but we're at Army, San Diego State. Public went with San Diego State. I also went with San Diego State. Crap, I can't even talk. On the strength of their running back. They had the most prolific running back in college football this year, and not a lot of people know that. Army got the great win over Navy, but right now I went with San Diego State based on that fact. Better athletes usually win in these type of games, and 79% of people agree with me. Matt, what are your thoughts?
This is one of those ones that I think could be prime for an upset. Army being a triple option school, a lot of programs don't see that on a consistent basis year to year. So I kind of went with Army in this one, thinking, if you have to prepare for it and it's not something conventional that you see, there's a high risk of an upset there.
This next one was on my upset watch, but I couldn't quite pull the trigger just because of how well Toledo has done this year. So I went with Toledo over Appalachia State for the reason that Toledo is just a better team, 11-2. Appalachia State's 8-4. They had a very close game against Tennessee, and if Tennessee would have played the year better, I probably would have went for them in the upset. But the way Tennessee folded makes me think they're just not a good team. And 86% of the people are also going with Toledo. That was my pick, and that was my reason why. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Kind of leaning towards Toledo just because App State just recently, within the last 5 or 6 years, made the jump from FCS to FBS. So they're just now kind of acclimating themselves to the lay of the land and getting up with that structure. So I kind of went with the more established program.
All right, this next one, this was my upset pick because I normally go between them, and I ended up with taking Houston over Fresno State. 63% of the votes came in on Fresno State, who ended up 9-4. Houston right now is sitting at 7-4. I went with Houston just because I think the way their coaches have been moving up, they are going to have the better talent on their roster. So it's kind of tough to pick, but whenever you're losing so many coaches because they're taking better jobs, it's not just the coach itself. Whenever it happens 2 or 3 times in a row, it's because you have talent right there in Texas and you're able to pull it at a program like Houston. And it's in Hawaii, which is one of my other ones where I kind of was going to lean towards Fresno, where I think everyone else's mindset was they're closer to Hawaii, it's going to be a shorter trip. But ultimately, I went with the upset here. Matt, what do you think?
I looked at Houston just because I like, with Major Applewhite playing or coaching with Tom Herman before he left for the Texas job. Didn't really know too much about Fresno State through the course of the year, but just recognizing that Houston's had a consistent program. They've had good coaches in place and built it up, so I kind of went with that as a more established program.
All right, now we're getting into it. Power 5. Utah versus West Virginia. I went West Virginia just because they're close to Pennsylvania, close growing up. Program that I like the way they do things. They have a focus on football, unlike some other schools that kind of dilly-dally. No names Pitt. in basketball instead and don't focus on building a football program. And I hope they win. They're in Dallas, so it's not like they're going too far west, and they're playing against Utah. I do like Utah's coach. I just think that he's on a down cycle based on recruiting. I think he'll be back next year, but I think this is the year for West Virginia to get it done. Matt, what are your thoughts?
West Virginia is one of those teams that they play really well at times, and then at times they just completely fall off the face of the earth, and you never know what to expect from them. When they're on, though, their offense is scoring ridiculous points like they did a couple years ago to Clemson, hanging 70-some points on them. You don't know what to expect. So I went with WVU there just because that's probably who I'm going to be rooting for in that game anyhow, so it just makes it easier to kill two birds with one stone.
All right. Works out then. Same team. Next one. Northern Illinois versus Duke. I went with the upset, Northern Illinois, because I don't think David Cutcliffe has the fire to be a coach. He's named in all these coaching interviews, and he's kind of like, no, you know what? That's going to be too competitive for me. I'd rather stay at Duke where I can go 6-6 like he did this year. I just don't think he cares. And whenever you're a program like that, if they're going to pay him to be mediocre, you're going to get mediocre results. And Northern Illinois is one of those programs like Houston. Doesn't matter who your coach is, you're consistently winning. They went to a BCS game just like Houston did, I think, quite a few years ago or a couple years ago. I don't think it was too long, actually. But that's my pick. Going with the upset in a quick lane bowl, whatever. But if that's what Duke wants for their program, great. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to be a homer here and take Duke. I want to see the ACC as a conference playing well. I just think with playing better talent through the course of the year, that Duke should handle their business and knock them off. Shouldn't be a contest.
All right, next one. Kansas State versus UCLA. Kansas State, dude, this one's so hard to pick. UCLA fired their coach, so I went with Kansas State. Because UCLA should have the better talent. Kansas State has Bill Snyder as their coach. I think that's his first name. He's like almost 90 years old. He's at least in his 80s, I think.
It's his second term there, I think.
Yeah, so he was fired once in the 90s. Their next coach was so bad that they hired him back. And he's been consistently winning. He went 7-5. I mean, they've pushed for titles. I don't know if they won a Big 12 title under him. But they fight. He's asking to come back next year. Some boosters want to run him out of town. But I think they're going to pull it out. What are your thoughts?
See, the thing always trips me up.
Excuse me. Go ahead. You're breaking up a bit, though.
Are out for the bowl games. The thing that trips me up is I don't know what players are sitting out of these bowl games, because UCLA's quarterback is a high prospect that if he plays, it goes to UCLA. If he decides to sit out and focus on the draft, then it swings to Kansas State. It just depends on which players are going to be there and which ones aren't.
Yeah, I guess you're right. And that's a good point. It looks like our Bull Pick'em lets you add teams and move teams around. So if you want to join, jump right in. We don't have anyone with too high of points. So come in. We're giving away a free t-shirt to the winning team. So come in, make your picks. You have quite a while. You can move them around. It looks like I can move the confidence. I think Matt might have mentioned that earlier. But yeah, so if you do find out that someone's not going to play, you can make your switch. But right now, as we're doing this, these are my picks live on Sunday, whatever the date is. Next game, I'll let you start with this one, Matt. Florida State versus Southern Miss.
See, this is one of those, I'm picking with my heart. Number one team, number one highest rated. Florida State should blow the doors off them. However, they're another team that they have a lot of players who are not going to be participating in the game due to preparing for the NFL draft. So while on paper, they should just completely destroy them. Don't look past Southern Miss to play a competitive game if they have their regular starting units playing in that game.
Do you know who Florida State's coach is going to be? Is it the interim that coached the other game?
I believe it will be Hagens.
Okay, yeah.
Even though Willie Taggart is in place, all signs are indicating that Hagens is going to be back since he's pretty much FSU royalty.
Yeah. Well, that was my thought. I didn't know if Taggart was replacing him and then they went with someone else. But yeah, normally the Tiger would not jump into a bowl game. That's why I picked Florida State. 86% of the people are going with them. They're only 6-6, but they have been playing. They played with fire under him, and I think whenever your coach leaves, you have something to prove. Especially when he jumped to. I don't want to say it's not an improvement. I know Texas A&M makes a ton more money or whatever they were throwing at Jimbo Fisher, but Florida State's the better program. They've been the better program. It's not even a comparison. Florida State is definitely like right in that top tier, maybe tier 2, not quite the tier 1 because that's such a small, limited pool of teams. But they're definitely ahead of Texas A&M. Texas A&M might be jumping up into that when they made the move to the SEC, but there's no reason Florida State should lose a coach to that school. And a lot of people don't know, but at Michigan, Bo Schembechler, he was recruited hard from A&M in like the 80s. They made the same deal where they paid him a ton of money. They said, come down here and win a national championship. And he thought, there's no way I'm leaving Michigan. I think he contemplated it, but he said that for that much money, things had to be dirty over there or something. You can look that up, but this isn't the first time they've tried to poach a head coach from a top program. But I went with Florida State here. I think they have the athletes, and I think they're going to roll. Next game, this game, Boston College versus Iowa. I loved Iowa growing up because I love Kirk Ferentz, but this is the type of game he loses. I couldn't pick against him, though. I had to go with Kirk Ferentz and Iowa Hawkeyes. They're both 7-5. 84% of the people went with Iowa, but I'm telling you, I love Kirk Ferentz, but he coaches so conservative in these bowl games, and he likes to try other guys out where he's getting ready for next year or getting guys looks for the NFL. So don't be surprised if they come out and lose this game. But I went with Iowa. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, this was one of those games that I had to go against my heart. I want Adazio because I think he's a good coach to do well at Boston College, but I got to get Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean,
they always play well in the bowl games. He has like so much preparation time with going back to Hayden Fry and the stuff that he learned there that they play well, but they don't play consistently. It's like they're another team like West Virginia that you think, oh, they turned the corner, and then they like lose to DeVry.
That's why I don't have confidence, because they already won their big game against Ohio State. They usually play to the level of their competition. They can blow the doors off Ohio State, and then they'll be in a struggler against Northern Iowa or someone. So they're going to play it tight. I really like A.J. Dillon. He was a Michigan, someone Michigan went after heavily. He's a running back, a freshman for there. I think was he the freshman of the year in the ACC or something? I know he was in the discussion for running backs. Keep an eye on him. He's a playmaker. I'm not too sure Iowa has a playmaker. So if he goes off a few plays, Iowa plays a bend but don't break defense. That's a team to look at, but I had to go with Iowa on that one. Next one, Purdue versus Arizona. This is almost a shit bowl. Like, there's no way around it. Purdue, their program is a joke. I've went off on them on the big show, on our normal show, because I guess it's considered the Southbound Sports Show. But I mean, their coach, he's fired up. Jeff Brom, he came in, he was talking a lot of trash, and then they went 6-6. They were in a position to compete in the Big Ten West and didn't do shit. So I don't know what to pick on them. So I went with Arizona. I went with Rich Rod. I was always a fan of Rich Rod. He was at Michigan. I really wish he would have worked out there. I think he got a bad rap and didn't have the support of the boosters. And when you don't have that, things don't go well. But he seems to have his stuff together out there. They have an explosive quarterback. I think he's in this game, but I'm not too sure. But that's who I went with. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I went with the same exact thing. I think that quarterback that he finally has found a quarterback to fit that system that he wants to run. And from what it looks like on the highlight reels, the kid makes plays. So I think it's got to be Arizona.
It reminds me of when he had Denard Robinson at Michigan and when he had Pat White at West Virginia. When you have it and that guy can click in that offense, look out. And remember, the year he left Michigan, Denard took that offense and won the Orange Bowl. So he won a big a BCS game in that system. And then, Pat White, number 2 in the country, lost to Pitt that year. So his offense can work when he has that guy. And I think Matt's right. I think he did find that guy. Next game, Texas and Missouri. This is an interesting one because there's been some bad blood. I went with Texas. just for the strength of Missouri. What are you doing? Your program is kind of in shambles. You're renting out dorms as apartments for football games because you have low student enrollment because you don't have good leadership like at your university. So it's kind of like, are you investing in football? Are you investing in athletics? You were close there. And then, I don't know, did Pinkel retire? He had like some health issues. I don't want to.
Yes, he retired at the end of the year.
Yeah, so I loved him as a coach. And I think right now they made their run when they joined the SEC. Everything seemed to be clicking. Then it was kind of like there was some inner turmoil stuff going on. I'm not 100% sure on the situation, but it kind of seemed like they're falling apart. And this is prime Texas right now. They are trying to build their program. They had some big wins. They also had some big losses. So right now, this is one that they need. 54% of the people are going with Texas. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I think when you look at, and you can look up the Missouri politic issues with the university, and I think that's where a lot of the issues with their overall program now come from, is the snowball effect of dealing with the politics. I think Texas is rolling, or in the process of getting rolling. They got their coach, they got the guy that they wanted, and I think that they're going to build from there. Texas is going to be back in the next couple of years as a national power again.
It's two teams trending in opposite directions. If you remember, Missouri was in the SEC East Championship, or they were in the SEC Championship game.
Yes, they were.
They were one game away from making the national championship or the playoffs or whatever. So, I mean, they're trending down, and they're going to need some. I don't know what's going to happen, but they have to get back on. This next one, Navy versus Virginia. And Matt, you're an ACC guy. I like Bronco Mendenhall. Is he still at Virginia? There were some rumors that he was going to leave, and I wasn't too sure on that one. So I put this one way down on my list. It's actually my number 1 point game. I picked Virginia over Navy just because they're both 6-6. I like Bronco as a head coach. It seemed like Virginia played up, but they also played down to their competition. So I couldn't get a good read on them. Were they undefeated this year? Let me look at their schedule. But what are your thoughts?
I looked at Navy here just because I don't think Virginia has all of the pieces of Bronco Mendenhall's schemes yet. I think he's still trying to recruit and fill his people into place. So I think he's still a couple years out of really putting a competitive Virginia team on the table. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I like Navy, the continuity, the system. Go Navy.
Yeah, I looked it up. Virginia started this season 5-1, and they ended at 1-5. That's why I wanted to pick them for the upset, but I'm just going to put a lot of confidence behind it. Because when you start to lose at the end of the season, that kind of just carries over. So I think Matt's right. I think they need the extra pieces, and they'll get there sooner rather than later. Because look at how BYU has fallen since he left. All right, this next game, Virginia Tech versus Oklahoma State. This is an intriguing matchup, the first of a couple that I have, because I wasn't too sure on this game just because of the different styles. I ultimately went with Oklahoma State because I think Virginia Tech, right now with their coaching transition a couple years ago, their talent has kind of dropped off. It's not what it was in the recruiting scheme. When Mike Gundy, he seems to have around the same talent. His offense can fire, and I think they're going to score points. And I don't think Virginia Tech can compete in a shootout. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Well, this is one of those coin flip games. Which Virginia Tech team shows up? If the Bud Foster defense that shows up versus Ohio State the last couple of years is in play, he could shut down this vaunted Oklahoma State defense, because in the Big 12 they don't play defense. So if the defense shows up, it could swing in their favor, or it could end up being an absolute beatdown. I like Virginia Tech in the contest, though, just because I think, given the amount of prep time that Bud Foster has, he's one of the top defensive coaches in the country, in my opinion, hands down. I think he'll have him ready to play.
I just think back to that West Virginia versus Virginia Tech game at the beginning of the year. That ended up being a close contest, and I think Oklahoma State's just a better version of West Virginia at this point. And right now they have 87% of the popular vote, which I can't believe it's that high. All right, next game.
People falling in love with the mullet.
Yeah, he was looked at for Tennessee and everywhere else for a job. All right, this next one, I'm going with the underdog, it looks like. Washington State versus Michigan State. Now, I will say this. I just don't care if Michigan State wins. Like, I want them to lose. And I love Mike Leach. I've talked about him all the time. So I hope Washington State's getting this. Only 38% of the people agree with me. I know Michigan State's going to come out with a chip on their shoulder, especially because I watched the press conference with this game, and someone brought up the Michigan had an auction on Jim Harbaugh's khakis, and that was actually a question to Michigan State coach Mark D'Antonio. So you have to think, however many times that he has to be so mad, because no matter how many times he beats Michigan, the national media just considers Michigan State Michigan's bitch. And so he's going to have to deal with these questions. So he's going to be super pissed off coming into this game. He was already mad that they were even in this game because they had the better record and Michigan got picked over them for the Outback Bowl. So I think they're going to come out and play with a chip on their shoulder, but I picked against them anyway just because I want them to lose. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, I learned my lesson last year. And the Pirate, we rooted for them. I wanted Washington State to win. I just don't think that they're going to get it done. I think D'Antonio's defense plays well. I think they're going to shut down the air raid attack of Mike Leach, and I think Michigan State's going to pull out the win. As much as I want to see a Washington State win, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, even though I picked them just because whatever. Next one, TCU versus Stanford. This one I think is the closest matchup of the whole bowl season. They both play similar styles. I know TCU kind of opened up their offense whenever they joined the Big 12. But they were both defense first, smash mouth teams. That's what they were built on. That's how they built their success. Right now, they're around the same. I'm actually surprised that 58% of the people are going with TCU. I went with Stanford in this one, and I'm leaning on a healthy Love at running back. Again, he might jump out, so then that might switch my vote. But right now I'm going with they're the higher ranked team, even though they're the people's underdog. I'm going with Stanford. Matt?
I like TCU. I think they came on some hard times for some reason. I don't know that Love's going to be healthy for the bowl game. For as bad as he was limping in the Pac-12 championship, I don't see how you make a miraculous recovery. Even with the amount of time off, I think he's still going to be banged up because of the amount of wear and tear of the season on him, that I just don't think that he'll have enough in the tank to pull it off.
Yeah, and even with like the NFL stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if he sat out. I'm not sure what class he is. All right, this next one I can't even find just because of how meaningless this one is. Wake Forest versus Texas A&M. Again, you have a program in turmoil with Texas A&M. Oh, I moved it down. I picked Wake Forest just because go ACC. For some reason, like, just beat Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is overvaluing their program. I brought it up earlier when we did the Florida State pick. And for them to go out and spend a ton of money on Jimbo Fisher, I hope it works out for them, but I just don't think he's the coach that they think he is. And in a few years, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida State was still the better program. So I'm going to go with an ACC team and stick with Wake Forest, even though only 29% of the people agree with me. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Guess what, Jimbo? I ain't mad at you. $75 million in guaranteed money. I went with the Aggies. If he doesn't bring anything else to Aggie land, he can at least lay out the blueprint, because he beat Wake Forest earlier in the year, so he knows how to play him. He knows what the tendencies are, and he can at least hand that information off to the coaches.
Yeah, and Wake Forest, they also give their play calls to the enemy. They have no problem doing that. Their radio guy, just give him a call. He'll tell you. He helped out Louisville, that dirty program. This next one, dude, I'm going to regret this so bad. I actually wrote it out. Actually, someone else wrote this out. I should have changed this. But it's actually NC State versus Arizona State. Someone wrote it as North Carolina State. They don't like that. But I went with North Carolina State, and I put a lot of high performance points on this, 39. I'm going to regret it because I know they're going to end up losing. But I went with them just based on the fact that Arizona State is falling apart as a program. You hire Herm Edwards. Your coaches are supposed to stick around. Now they're leaving. Herm Edwards Dude, he hasn't coached in forever. People were making fun of my John Gruden to Tennessee stuff because he hasn't coached in forever. Herm Edwards is even worse. Like, come on. And does he? I don't even know. I don't even know his I don't know his coaching history because I was probably like 10 and 12 when he was coaching. So give me a break, Arizona State. You basically kept your whole coaching staff around, and they weren't good. You basically said, okay, we're not happy with your results, but we're just gonna fire the head coach and everyone else. You can keep doing your jobs. Yeah, you don't have any effect on the 7-5 record. So I went with NC State, hoping that they're able to build on this season by extending Doeren, and I think they're gonna get this one done. Next season, I think they're gonna fall off. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll get around to that in a later episode this offseason. But Matt, what are your thoughts?
I went Wolfpack as well. I think they were a team that I was heavily considering to be a front runner to win the ACC as the season progressed. They stumbled at the end of the year, but I think with the talent that they have, it's just going to be too much for Arizona State. Though I do want to say I'm glad that Fraud Graham got canned. I just wish that they would have had the decency to just pack his office for him in the same manner that he'd just show up and just have his office empty, like what the Pitt players had to experience when he just like jumped on a plane in the middle of the night and was like, all right, I'm heading to Arizona State, see you guys later. High octane.
Yeah, high octane. That's what I was thinking. That's what we should have called our segment instead of high tempo, just as a dig on him. But yeah, I can't believe that he left like that, and now he gets fired, and who's going to hire him? Because you can't talk a bunch of trash and then end up being a dud. Next game, this game it's one of those ones where Kentucky will claim they're a basketball school, even though they still have a football program, so that doesn't make sense because their football program still makes tons of money in the SEC, and you know that's where they get all their money. But Northwestern versus Kentucky. Dude, I've been picking against Big Ten teams just because I used to pick them, and last year I started to pick by conference, and I picked against them, and it didn't really work out because I went with a lot of SEC, and I think they were barely mediocre. But I'm looking at this, and I'm saying Northwestern's a better team. Kentucky, they're kind of just like, they're like a team just waiting in the desert, hoping for 6-6 and 7-5 years, and then claiming that they don't care about football. But I think they have a higher attendance at football for sure than basketball, but they'll claim that football doesn't matter. So I'll pretend that they don't matter and I won't pick them. Matt, what about you?
I went with Northwestern here just because my gut says to pick Kentucky. With Stoops being the head coach and setting the table for Pruitt to take over at Florida State their national championship year, I like what he does as a coach, but I just don't think that they have it's one of those games that you flip a coin and pick your winner. I don't think that Northwestern's going to win, but I'm picking Northwestern just because why not?
Yeah, Northwestern, man. Their coach, he loves the program, and he played there. I think he was there. He played during their last Big Ten championship, maybe. He might have been gone by then. So great guy by all accounts of what I've heard. So I'll be happy if they do get the win. Next one, dropping off here for some reason with Utah State and New Mexico State. I could find my pick here in a second. What are your thoughts on this one?
I went Utah State just because I have no idea.
Yeah,
don't really know too much about either program, and I know New Mexico State's been in the trash for a long time, and they're coming back. They're obviously did well enough this year to make a bowl game, but I think Utah State's had more success recently, and I went with them because of that.
I have this one for some reason at 33 points. I must not have moved it because I don't think it moved my teams. So I definitely have to move this because I have no idea. I picked Utah State just because I knew that they had some coaching success. They actually started Gary Anderson, that guy that kind of moved up to Wisconsin and in Oregon State. He jumped around and then basically gave up. And I haven't heard more to that story, so I still don't know. My theory was that there was a reason he left in the middle of the season, but I went with them. 73% of the people agree with me. It was honestly a coin flip. Because I didn't look at the percentage. I might have looked at the line, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's 6-6 right now, both teams. So who knows with that one? All right, starting to get into the bigger games. Is this the Rose Bowl? Ohio State versus USC?
Might be.
Oh no, it's the Cotton Bowl this year. Which, is this a fun fact? Because I can be making this up on the fly. Is this the first time that that both the Big Ten and the Pac-12 champion have played in a bowl game other than the Rose Bowl? Because if you think about it, some of them, like one a time, at least one of the champions would have been in the Rose Bowl. They both wouldn't have met outside the Rose Bowl unless it was a national championship, which never happened in the BCS era. So I think this might be the first time. Look that up. But I went with Ohio State because I don't think Sam Darnold's that good. Anyone that gets media hype like that and then just has like a game like Texas where he's not completing passes and then he gets lucky, it just, to me, it doesn't seem like he has the qualities of a true leader. And I think Urban Meyer is going to have the Buckeyes out to roll because they didn't make the playoffs, and you know what's going to happen. It could have went two ways. Ohio State just missed out on the playoffs, so they just might not care. But I think he's going to come out with a vengeance, and they're going to roll on USC and try to push that narrative that they need to expand the playoffs. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, when I looked at this game, I think there's a lot of bias towards Ohio State because they should have been in the playoffs and they were left out. But the thing is, last year they were in the playoffs and they did nothing. They got shut out by Clemson. And I think that there is something there at USC building. I went with USC in this one over the Buckeyes just because I think Ohio State for the better part of the year has been overrated. They haven't really they beat up on lesser teams against quality programs. They struggle and stumble, and there's all kinds of excuses. And I just think it's going to lead to Urban Meyer falling apart again.
I've been torn on him, and I don't know about Clay Helton as a coach either. So it's kind of like, is USC going to be into this situation where they're winning, but they're not winning enough? Like, you can win the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is not as competitive as the Big Ten, no matter what West Coast media members will tell you. It's just not. If USC can win it at 11-2, and people don't consider them to be close enough to even make the playoffs, then I just don't think that they're going to be used to it. And the fact that it's not in California, I think is going to play a part in that game with how I went with Ohio State. Next one, Louisville and Mississippi State. All right, let me look at my board here for this one. This is another one. Who cares for me? Both programs are basically, Louisville is definitely a cheating program, football and basketball. You can't tell me they were cheating in basketball but not in football. Like, give me a break, because they came out of nowhere. They were a nobody in the Big East until around that same time frame that the FBI is looking into. But I went with them. 68% of the people went with them, it looks like, too. And it's a toss-up. Mississippi State, I think, is just overrated. They're in the SEC. They've had like some of their moments, but it's kind of like you beat up on enough crappy programs and then lose your big games, you're not a good team. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I kind of just looked at Louisville and thought, I just think that he is. I just think Lamar Jackson's better than what Mississippi State's able to put out on defense. So I went with Louisville.
Yeah, and I think Mississippi State, they had a good quarterback, but I think he went out in the last game. I don't know if he's playing in this game or not. I don't even know if he's going to be in the NFL. Next one. This one's intriguing for me, and I think, I know I went with Iowa State, at least I'm pretty sure I did, versus Memphis. And it's because I think Iowa State finally has a coach that he actually signed an extension to stay at Iowa State. And I did go with them. I didn't move it up. I swear to God they didn't pick my confidence points because I had this one pretty high. Memphis is getting picked by 75% of the people. They were 10-2. But Iowa State's building something, and they beat Oklahoma. I mean, they played close at Iowa. Like, they're a decent program, and their coach is actually sticking around to stay. I would love to see them win, and I went with them. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Same thing. Memphis's coach at Norvell was with Fraud Graham at Arizona State, so got to do my pops right and root against anyone associated with that Fraud Graham program, and went with Iowa State.
Yeah, and I don't think he got hired away, too. So, like, he was in the job interviewing at these bigger schools. Like, I don't know if he actually went to Tennessee or wherever. But if you're not getting the call, something's up. So it just didn't give me a good feeling. And I know Iowa State's been building on a good program. And, yeah, they play a tougher schedule, so that's why they have more losses. But I think they're the better team. Next one. Oh, with another upset. Again, that Big Ten thing, even though I picked Ohio State. Washington over Penn State. And I'll tell you why. Washington has Chris Peterson as a coach. He's a great coach. He made them make the playoffs in, his second or third year there. And Penn State has James Franklin. And James Franklin, I think his secret weapon was his offensive coordinator, who left to coach. Is he coaching to Mississippi State?
Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another reason I picked against them, because they are in coaching turmoil. And so you have Penn State, and I saw a lot of their fans saying that this is a better move. Like, no, Franklin was getting killed by everybody until he had an offensive guy that could come in there and innovate. He lost that, and he's been outcoached before. I mentioned he was outcoached by Brady Hoke. I was at the game. I watched it right there, so I just don't think. I think he's going to get outcoached. The offense isn't going to be the same unless he's running wild like you saw last year with USC, which they still lost that game. I just don't see them coming out on top. What are your thoughts?
This was a tough one for me to pick. I had to go against my better wishes, and I got to pick Penn State in this. There's no way. Here's how you're going to beat Washington. Saquon Barkley is going to touch the ball 35 times, and they're going to win. It's not going to be pretty by any stretch of the imagination, but you're going to feed them. You're going to let them run wild, and that'll be the end of it. Washington can't compete with that.
I don't know. I haven't seen all year. I've been waiting for Barkley to do it, and he hasn't really. Even in the games that they won, like when they blew out Michigan, I mean, he had a couple big plays, but that was it. He didn't maintain it. He didn't do it against Ohio State. He didn't do it against some of these lesser schools that would have put him in the Heisman contention. I mean, he wasn't even invited. He had basically, it was served to him on a silver platter after that Michigan game, and he fell apart. So I don't think Penn State can rely on him.
But to me, that's the epitome of Penn State football, though. When I remember them, when I see them, they do just good enough to be average, but they don't do enough to take that next step to knock off the Michigans, to consistently compete with Ohio States, the Wisconsins. They just don't do it. And whether it's scheme, whether it's...
I lost you again there for a sec.
Doing anything with it.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're there. So I agree with you. They seem like they're there. They make the jump, but just never enough. And I think that's why, like you saw it last year, they should have petitioned harder to make the playoffs. They didn't. And then afterwards, they were all shocked because they used that attitude like, okay, we're in. We're the Big Ten champs. We're in. When they should have been petitioning and complaining, and then the Big Ten wouldn't have been left out this year. So some of that blame's on them and Ohio State's fan base for that same reason. So I don't really care about them. Next one. Miami versus Wisconsin. Miami fell apart. So I had to go with Wisconsin, even though I don't think Wisconsin's going to win, but Wisconsin's going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder. They were 12-1. If any team that was left out of the playoffs for a resume, it should have been them. They should have been the mad team, not Ohio State. I know Ohio State beat them, but they had the better record. That wasn't a blowout game by any means. And you're sitting there with only one loss. Their schedule is very, very close to what Alabama played. And remember, Alabama only plays an 8-game conference schedule. So that Florida State game they were taunting, even though Florida State ended up 9-9, that was only their 9th big game. That basically is the same as Wisconsin playing a 9-game Big Ten schedule. So don't tell me otherwise. Whenever you play two crappy programs that Wisconsin doesn't, your schedule's not better. I mean, who cares if you beat up on Ole Miss and Mississippi State, programs that have never won? So I had to go with Wisconsin in this one just because Miami's been falling apart, and I don't know what's up with them. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I thought Wisconsin was a bit overhyped, and I thought that they were the beneficiaries of a cupcake schedule. I think Miami's going to be pissed off that they got left out because of the issues with losing to Pitt, and I think that they're going to have that obnoxious turnover chain out in high swing, and it'll be the U over Wisconsin. It'll
be interesting. I think that's going to be another one of the best matchups because both of them don't have, even though Miami has the explosive athletes, they really don't run that on offense. So it's going to be a smash mouth football game, and I think you're going to see like an old school Miami team playing against that classic Badgers game. Think of like the late 90s when Miami was rolling and Wisconsin was rolling. You're going to see that game. Next one, Michigan versus South Carolina. Again, this is my highest confidence pick, and I went with Michigan, of course, because I just think you're looking at a team in South Carolina that doesn't have the pieces to, I don't want to say, I think both teams here, South Carolina is going to look at Michigan and say, this is an easy game. This is the best matchup we could have had in the Big Ten. We landed them for some reason instead of Michigan State. They don't have an offense. But Michigan had a quarterback problem all year. And I think Peters got knocked out with a concussion. He wasn't cleared to play the Ohio State game. And basically, when you have bad quarterback timing with their main guy, I think that Ohio State game might have ended up differently. It was close enough without him. And I think he's going to come back. And there's some hype there to play well because they also got Shea Patterson transferring in from Ole Miss. So I think you're going to see a quarterback who's going to try to claim that position early before that other guy gets on campus, and I think he's going to be on fire. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I looked at this game the same way I looked at the Penn State game. It's good. I picked Michigan in it just because it's the wrong thing to do. Because if I pick South Carolina, Michigan blows them out. So I'll go with Michigan just because I think that it's a game they should win. But will they? Time will tell.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one where Michigan played a lot of young guys, and their defense is awesome, and I don't think South Carolina has the weapons on offense to match up with that. So basically it's going to be what should be a low-scoring game, and I think the edge is going to be you now have a quarterback who's playing for his job. You're bringing in, I think he was the number 1 overall. I think he was number 4 overall recruit, the number 1 quarterback. You're bringing him on campus as a transfer. He has to be on. So I think that's what's going to happen because you don't want to go out with a dud whenever you have a quarterback battle looming in the spring. Next game, Auburn versus UCF. And I better check my pick before I get into this one. I was torn on this one. And I moved this one did save. I did move it down. I went with Auburn. I really wanted to go with UCF, and the reason I didn't was because Scott Frost left. And we mentioned it earlier in the show. When a coach leaves, it's tough. When a coach leaves, it's tough on the guys. They're either going to rally or they're just going to come out flat, and you don't know what's going to happen because it's college-age kids. So I had to go with Auburn. I think they're playing for a little bit more chip on their shoulder type stuff like, hey, even though we have 3 losses, we should have been in the playoffs. And I wouldn't be surprised if they blew them out. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I picked Auburn in this game too just because I think talent-wise they have the better roster. But Scott Frost is coaching this bowl game. I do believe. I might be wrong, but I thought I read he's staying to coach the game, and then he's going to finish out at Nebraska. He wanted to finish the year out for those players. So they'll have him for one more game, but I think you're right. The coaching, they know he's gone, so you may get a flat effort by the UCF players.
Yeah, I don't know if I made that clear, but yeah, if he does coach, it doesn't matter if he's there or not. It's the fact that he's leaving. So how many guys are going to put in 100% effort in these practices up to a bowl game? I played college sports. I know how it happens whenever your coach is leaving. You don't care. You don't care if he's coaching. You know that, hey, all right, I just need to hang out and make a good impression for the next guy. No need to listen to this guy. So I went through a coaching change myself, and I just know that that's the mindset usually of the team. Now, will they rally together and play for themselves? I don't know. But that will be an interesting game to see. I just can't. Too much of a gamble for me to pick otherwise. This next game, are these going by time?
Real quick, though, before you go any further, I think in the small school battle, UCF has to decisively beat Auburn if they want to get themselves in the non-power fives because they're undefeated, they're a conference champion, and they have a legit argument as to why they should be in the playoffs. If they lay an egg versus Auburn and they get blown out, it's going to solidify the fact that if you're not Power 5, you don't deserve to make the playoffs, and it's going to hurt them. If they come out and play tough, now you have one more proverbial gun in the barrel of why the playoffs need to be expanded.
And I'll build on that. They're also playing for a chance to join one of these bigger conferences because the Big 12 actively took applicants. Was it last year? or this summer. Like, they actually told teams to apply, and I would bet that UCF was one of those teams. UCF is the largest school in Florida. Don't put that past them. When you have the biggest school there, you're going to have more alumni over time. People laughed and said it was a commuter school. That's what Louisville was, and people laughed at them. Once you get that outside money, you join a big conference, you're undefeated, you win some championships, it's bound to happen where they're in a position right now, they blow out Auburn. They can go ahead and apply to the Big 12 once again and say, like, hey, we're right here. You want an East Coast presence? You're tired of your games being in that central time zone? Right here we are in the biggest East Coast state, and we have the most alumni, or we have the biggest student body. I'm not sure if the alumni thing is true yet or not, but right now they have the most enrollment of any Florida school. So keep an eye on that. Jumping in, I think we only have a couple left here. Notre Dame at LSU. Should be the last one before the playoffs. If I missed one, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to go through the list. I don't want to go through my order since we did the rank 'em thing. So I go ahead an outside list for this. I went with Notre Dame because it's not that I don't like him. I just don't think Ed Orgeron is a good coach. I think they settled. When you failed once, you're bound to fail again. Right now, he has the benefit of having Les Miles players. And I think over time, that record's just going to go down. I think he's Brady Hoke of the SEC. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I went with Notre Dame in this one, just thinking that with all the coaching changes that happened, it looks like Kelly made the right moves and got them moving in the right direction. They were at one point a team that was heading towards making the playoffs or making a push for the playoffs, and then tailed off with their ACC schedule at the end of the year. But with LSU losing to Troy, I think that left a sour taste in my mouth as well.
Yeah, when you can't lose to teams like that. And I think Notre Dame, they made a bunch of coaching changes, and I think that got them off to their hot start. I think teams started to come around. But it usually takes a year or two to get those things in place. And I think now that they had some time to retool some things here in the offseason, that it's going to come out, and they're going to come out on fire like they did at the beginning of the year. All right. Like I said, that should be it for the main games. We're now into the playoffs. And we're just going to touch on these. We're going to bring them up probably on the show again as we get closer to these. Right now, we'll start with the first one, Oklahoma and Georgia. Matt, what are your thoughts?
We're going to find out real quick if Baker Mayfield's the real deal or not, because now he's not going to go up against a cupcake team. He's going to see a real defense. Oklahoma's defense is going to be tested with a ground and pound offense. Let's see. I don't think that Oklahoma has what it takes to go. I mean, with what Iowa State did to them, I'm leaning towards Georgia here.
Now, I'll say this. I think this was the best matchup for Oklahoma, and I'm picking Oklahoma. Georgia, you saw what happened when they played Auburn, which is it's not exactly the same style as what Oklahoma runs, but it's still a spread type. They do a lot more motions running it wide. But Oklahoma runs that same spread type defense or offense, and that's going to hurt the Georgia defense. I know they're going to get a lot of guys in space, and I think that this could be a rout. I think it was the best possible matchup for Oklahoma, and so I'm picking them. The next game, Clemson and Alabama. I looked at this one, and I think right now Clemson's going to win. They're the number one team. They're the reigning champs. Right now, Dabo has things rolling. I did see a thing where ESPN published that this was a playoff of 4 blue bloods. And I hate to say it, Clemson fans, but Clemson is not a blue blood program. You can't win only one national championship every 50 years and claim you're a blue blood and not have conference championships and other things to back it up. You have to have more wins than that over time. You can't lose your conference to Florida State every year for 20 years. So I'm looking at this, and if they want to be that blue blood level, they have to win more than one. You have the coach to do it, and you can do that. Win 2 or 3, and then there's no discussion. Make that move. Prove that point. Go ahead and get it done. This is your chance right now. Knock out Alabama, and you can tarnish that Saban legacy. And right now, you'll see some grumbling, because I guarantee it, if Alabama loses to Clemson again, people will start grumbling about Saban not being a good coach and how they want to have Dabo come over to them. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I went with Clemson as well, but I rated this really, really low, just because Saban is such a great defensive mind that you can't. I think it's going to be a great matchup. The thing that stands out to me in this, and we had touched on this earlier in the year, is offensive coordinator Brian Daboll. I don't think he's a good coach. He tanked when he was in Cleveland. He was a head coach in the NFL and didn't do well. There was nothing that made me feel confident that him going to Alabama was going to be a step up from what he had with Lane Kiffin. And you're seeing when you don't have the offensive firepower to go along with that defense, what's happening now. That you're getting solid play through the course of the year, but then you're falling short when it matters most, and it's playoff time and you need the offensive firepower.
Yeah, and that's where you'll see like Lane Kiffin come out and he'll troll him, which I love to see, just because you have that. And if you're going to make the moves, you have to go up. And I think right now this is strength on strength, and I guess more so weakness on weakness. You have Clemson up against that Alabama defense, but you also have that Alabama offense up against the Clemson defense, which is their strength. So this could go either way. It could be like last year where it ends in the 30s, or it could be like a 14-10 bloodbath out there. I don't think you'll see something like the LSU game a few years ago against Alabama, or it was 6-3 or whatever. But I could see something like that happen. And
here's an interesting take for you.
Go ahead.
Chad Morris, when he left Clemson to go to SMU, sold his house to Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator that's at Clemson. There's a distinct possibility that with Chad Morris going to Arkansas, he may try to throw some of that SEC money and pull Venables down south if things go to plan with Clemson. So that could be a storyline to follow a little bit closer to see, does he make that jump, and if he does, how does that play out as far as the effectiveness of his game planning and team chemistry.
Yeah, and it's another one of those things that you really can't plan for. And you don't know how invested someone is on the team and what they're doing, and that's a key position, defensive coordinator. So we'll use that as a segue into the national championship. I think we made pretty good time, around our normal hour or so. I don't know if we went over that or not. But the final national championship, who did I say? I had Clemson versus Oklahoma, and I had Clemson winning it. I think they're going to make the stride, and I would hate to see them. I mean, they're close. They're an ACC team. I live here in Raleigh. They're a team that I would pull for. I know NC State kind of has a rivalry with them, but right now I like their program. I like everything about the school, and I want them to win. Oklahoma would be my number 2. That's who I have them matched up against, just because of Baker Mayfield. I have the score at 31-24. I think the Clemson defense is too good. And that could be proven wrong, but that's what I'm going with. I think that's the strength, and that's what wins championships. What is your take, Matt?
I went opposite. I went with the Georgia-Oklahoma winner just because I think if Georgia gets there, they're going to have the defense that can be comparable to what Alabama or Clemson can bring offensively. That, I just think that when you're looking at those teams, they're going to have the defense to do it. I don't feel confident in the offensive output with Clemson playing a young quarterback, playing on a big stage. They don't have Deshaun Watson now to bail them out of trouble. And I'm curious to see what wrinkles Alabama's going to bring, because I don't think that they're going to bring anything new to this, and it's going to be the same stale product that's going to end up getting them bounced again.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and we're going to touch on this a little bit more in depth once we do know these matchups later in our show. So for those that might just be checking out for the first time, we do our weekly show every Tuesday at 9 p.m. live on Facebook, and we put it out as a podcast, so make sure you subscribe to the Southbound Sports Show. I don't really have any final thoughts. We'll be digging into some things. Disappointed that the Steelers lost, so it'll take me a few days to get over that. Matt, you have anything to close on?
Yeah, this is an exciting time of year because it's where you're getting good quality football through the course of the year, and it's nice to be able to watch that with friends and family this time of year. So this is, for me, one of the highlights of my year, bowl season.
Yeah, and we also got some good news. They might be bringing back the XFL. Always big fans of more football. You know that. We're definitely going to mention that on the big show.
Absolutely.
So come back on Tuesday and check that out. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Everything's on the show if you're watching this live on Facebook. And we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Thanks again.